All right, folks. Are we all set? All right, great. Let's get started. So welcome to the Using Metadata to Drive a New User Experience panel. This is all about the entertainment industry. We're going to give you guys a view of the entertainment industry, and then we're also going to talk about metadata, data, how it's changing the industry. And just so you're aware, this is going to be the best panel at MarkLogic World, by far. We are absolutely going to knock it out of the park because this is a great topic. It's a topic that affects us all. So entertainment, how we experience it, the way that we're consuming it, the way that it's made, the way that people can monetize it, it's all rapidly, rapidly changing. And we have with us here 3 experts up from Hollywood, guys that are in the middle of all of these changes. And the entertainment industry has always been about making great content, telling great stories, making amazing experiences. And these gentlemen that I've had the pleasure to work with, and many of you in the audience also know, are working in the industry to bring data and metadata into that mix, really so that we can continue to experience this great content. So it's going to be a great panel, and I want to first of all, please join me in welcoming our metadata panel. So thank you guys. All right. And I'm going to list you guys off. So they are Rajiv Lund he's the manager of the metadata systems at Warner Brothers. Eddie Lee. You guys can clap this is entertainment. You have to clap after every name. Okay, there you go. Thank you. Woo! Eddie Lee is, so Warner Brothers is our very first customer in the space. Thank you. Eddie Lee, our Vice President of Production at NBCUniversal Entertainment Digital. Eddie is the man responsible for the SNL app that you guys saw in a keynote. So awesome. All right. And Eric, they don't know you. So Eric Weaver is a project lead for production in the cloud at the Entertainment Technology Center and the University of Southern California. I get it mixed up. And he was just boasting about how he gets to hang out in the Spielberg building at the private IMAX. So that's worth a round of applause. Woo! All right, so I gave you guys a list, but I want you guys to also introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about what you're up to, your organization, what you're up to, and something that everybody can relate to. So let's go, Eric. Go right off to you.
So I work for the ETC. It's been around 25 years. It was the idea of George Lucas and the School of Cinematic Arts at USC. So one of the problems the studios have is if they come together and they do something, they're potentially into antitrust. So I report directly to the CTOs of all 6 major studios and kind of guide collaborative efforts. So that's kind of my point of focus there. And I'm specifically looking at production and cloud-based workflows as we move forward. Other things our organization has done is digital cinema. We helped create that, and IMF. So.
I'm Eddie Lee, Vice President of Technology for NBC Entertainment Digital. So our group is responsible for all digital products for NBC Entertainment, the broadcast network. So that varies from show products like America's Got Talent or The Voice. Maybe you guys vote or watch The Voice. It's responsible for video viewing for on-domain, so NBC.com, NBC, iOS, Android apps, connected TV devices, Apple TV, Roku, so on and so forth. And then we do things, specialized things like SNL. So the SNL app that was aforementioned, that was another thing that we worked on. And please download our apps.
I'm Rajiv Lund. I basically am the manager for metadata systems over at Warner Brothers. And the group that I basically work with is the content management and distribution team. And our work is primarily involved around basically master data management and metadata distribution for all of our home entertainment products. So whether it's to do with theatrical releases, television shows, or even games, getting the metadata out to your various digital partners, those are the systems we sort of help build and manage.
Okay, so got our stage, got our guys, so let's get into the topic. So the entertainment industry today is not at all resembling what it was even 3 years ago, even 5 years ago. So I want you guys to each talk a little bit about some of the changes in the industry and also how you got involved in doing technology in the industry. So we'll just go back around. So Reggie.
Okay, so I actually was a consultant by nature, and then it just so happened that one of my first gigs in Los Angeles was at WB when we were about to roll out our master data management solution. And I think it was right around then where you saw like this huge proliferation in content and new markets where the data was basically being made available. I mean, if you look at it right now, Netflix is in all but 2 or 3 countries, as is Apple, as is Google. So there was this huge sort of wave of content being made available worldwide, which is what sort of drew the impetus for metadata distribution. And that's how I basically got involved with this, and it's been just more and more data ever since then.
All right. Eddie?
So my background, I started more kind of on the B2B side. It's pretty much mainly been entertainment, but I started in digital asset management, got into metadata, master data management, a lot of that around kind of the digital distribution around entertainment. So going to NBC, I've been there about a few years now. I got to go on the consumer side, which is a lot different. There are a lot of different challenges, but there's a lot of the same challenges as well. But I think some of the things that we're facing in terms of the shifting industry is, we have various problems. I mean, I think metadata affects us in a lot of different ways, but we still have to get metadata out to partners. I mean, that is still an important thing. I mean, we do care that you just watch NBC content, and we are on a lot of different platforms, even with partners like Hulu and Apple, so on and so forth. But we also really care that you come to our properties as well and really watch on our domain. So there are challenges there, but I think the other thing is that, as you guys probably know yourselves in just your own viewing habits, like viewing habits are changing in terms of how you're consuming content. A lot of that's going to connected TV devices, so you probably have Apple TVs and Rokus, and you're consuming content that way. You're consuming it, not necessarily the night that it airs, but maybe later that night, maybe a week later, or you're binge watching. So a lot of those different viewing patterns, like, we have to build experiences that support that. And so that is a changing thing, and it's changing all the time. But I think the other thing that is a challenge is that we're not competing with just broadcast networks anymore. So it's not ABC, Fox, CBS. And it's not even just Hulu and Netflix. It's games. It's like Snapchat. It's just when you're on your device, you can do so many different things. So that's the challenge, is that you're competing against all that. So how are you going to differentiate your experience? How are you going to bring people back? How are you going to retain your users? And that is a different challenge.
So I was the CEO of a company, and we had built originally back in 2001 Beowulf clusters and sold time on them, which evolved into grid
Sorry,
computing.
can you just slow down for a second? How many people know what a Beowulf cluster is?
No. So it's
No, you
some
won't
of the
raise your
first
hand?
clusters.
Yeah, there should be a couple people in here who know what that is. All right.
So we were building kind of what eventually would be the data center now. And we sold time on those systems, and it evolved into grid computing, which eventually evolved into cloud computing. Well, we started to see a lot of jobs for rendering and visual effects where they needed a private resource to do some projects one-off. So they might need 2,000 to 3,000 computers for 2 weeks. That's it, to finish a film or a project. And I was working on a video game Rock Band, so we were simulating people playing, and Microsoft did a white paper, and they introduced me to the organization that I'm at right now. So one of the things you got to see in the industry that's so radically different is less than 10 years ago, we were on film, right? So we've shifted from film to tape and then to file, and now we're looking at almost what's called network or shared resources across a lot of different things. And there was a major transition when you went this changed so quickly. And one of the big spurring things was actually the earthquake in Japan. Because when we were all on tape, the place that was producing 90% of the tapes was basically the Sony lab in Japan, and it got destroyed. And when that lab went down, nobody could get tapes anymore. So they all moved or migrated to basically file-based workflows. And so, again, this industry is so new to all this different stuff. Metadata before was key code and what's on the side of the strip of the film. So in less than 10 years, now we've got a totally new world.
So I want to keep on going with that thread. So just looking at the different stages of the entertainment content. So kind of go back into, so we're going to go production, distribution, experience. And just thinking about production a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit more about the project, but so people are using the different media. What are some of the other things that are changing in production today versus even like 3 or 4 years ago?
So in production, you've got so many different silos between the software pieces, the different parts of your organization you're dealing with, all this metadata. And most of the time, people are like, I don't need that particular piece of metadata, so why not just throw it out? Or I don't want a file that has it embedded because it's so large. I don't know if anybody understands the size of the files nowadays in production. They're typically shooting between 5 and 7 terabytes a day of content, just to start with. And so these numbers get out of hand really quickly. So we've got a tremendous number of challenges in moving or organizing or managing the metadata, all these different parts and pieces. And
so a lot of people here, or maybe from the enterprise, we're thinking about workflows to kind of go, okay, I'm going to take step 1, I'm going to take step 2, I'm going to take, and then I'm going to be, and I'm going to have an outcome. Is the film industry like that at all?
So what's another thing that's really tricky to understand is every single time you do a production or anything, it's all what's called snowflake workflows. And snowflake means that everything is defined every single time you get a new production. So there's no standards, there's no setups. Maybe you might have a consistent way to deal with the parent company, Warner Brothers, but this stuff is done on kind of a production level. So the studios quite often just simply venture capital, almost like productions. Here's the money, you accomplish this, and you deliver this. And so they have to build up their own systems that then eventually integrate or work with the studios itself.
So just give me, and I don't know if you guys actually, because we didn't plan this answer, so guess what? How many productions are there in a given, like let's say in a month across the studios, and I mean, how many productions are in full swing like right now?
Well, right now we're in pilot season, so there's all these wannabe shows that are popping up. I wouldn't know. I mean, what would you think? I mean, there's quite a few. It's tremendous numbers.
And you're also seeing a lot of local productions sort of come into effect these days. So if you look at markets like China, 60% of their content is local productions, which you basically don't have a lot of insight into as a studio. And then there's also original content being produced by the likes of Amazon and Hulu and those guys.
Google, YouTube now.
So I'm starting to get a picture of channeling David Gorbett's channel from yesterday. So there are thousands of productions happening. Each one of them is its own isolated island, running its own processes, kicking off 7 or 8 terabytes a day, and somewhere this all has to make sense to us. All right. Okay. So I want to take that picture because that's production. So we originally got started in the business over in distribution and the kind of post-production world. In other words, people would make a film and it was done, and they threw away all the stuff that they didn't need while they were making it, and then that's where the kind of next phase starts. So why don't you talk a little bit about that phase?
Yeah, like to that point, there was no real integration between the data that basically was associated with pre-production, production, and post. All the metadata that we were capturing was sort of marketing metadata that you just needed from an operational perspective to then get your content out to a digital storefront. So all the metadata we were capturing were to do with internal line of business systems, like say you'd have like a system of record for theatrical data, a system of record for television data. And so what we were doing is we were getting all this data from these sources, but it was way ahead in the digital supply chain. It was after post, and it was mainly to do with localized metadata. So you might have like a title that's localized in like 50 different languages, ratings that are applicable to a certain territory, and then release windows that are applicable to those territories. So we were getting all of that, and then where we basically had a lot of success with MarkLogic was in shifting or basically moving away from traditional ETL tools like your Informaticas or your message brokers, and using the power of MarkLogic to then transform that data into different client specifications so I can get that content out to Apple, I can get that out to Amazon, I can get that out to all of my partners on time.
So how many partners?
Today we've onboarded about 25 partners, all of which all of those clients get feeds from MarkLogic. And what we're also starting to see right now is in the past, when you didn't have a lot of sort of industry standards in place, each client would have their own unique format of how they want the metadata sent to them. So Apple would basically ask for metadata in like format A, Amazon in format B, Netflix in format C. And that, while MarkLogic can do that, or NoSQL can do that, it's not very efficient from a digital supply chain perspective. It means whenever a new client comes on, there's going to be more time for you to onboard that client. But with EMER now coming out with like say standard specifications for title metadata, for technical metadata, is you have partners beginning to adopt a common standard, it then becomes easier for you to onboard those clients because you then don't have to go in and look for the metadata and make sure that you have the metadata for client A, B, or C.
So I'm going to channel David Sugg for a second because he often talks about your ability, Warner Bros. Ability to take care of those edge cases that are competitive advantages. So sometimes standards mean,
sometimes standards help. It's what you want to move towards. But I mean, where we're good at is we've used the tool for so long right now, where if a new client comes and basically asks us to basically give them metadata in like a certain custom specification, we can onboard them as quickly as 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And give them a feed.
You want to add in?
So there's one other confusion you might have is we assume that there's one film. There's not really one film. There's usually about 100 versions of a film. And then once you get into that, you also then have all the different distribution platforms and other things you got to service to. So usually I think Deluxe is doing about 500 and something different versions that they're kicking out worldwide.
Yeah. So we'll come back to TOPS a little bit. You guys should all be now picturing a hub solving this problem. But I want to talk a little bit about the consumer side. So it's relatively new for the entertainment industry itself to be interacting with consumers and be there. You guys used to make the film, and we used to kid about it, right? You make the film, you do some marketing material, and you're done, right? So what's happening now with consumers and experiences?
Well, I guess to that statement, I'd say yes and no. I mean, I think that like being in the TV industry specifically, I think movies are a little different, but like TV, you're making content and people are watching TV. I mean, that's how we're directly interfacing with customers. I mean, I don't think it's as close a relationship. You get the Nielsen ratings that are the model's a little bit different. But now in the digital space, starting from just viewing on a website to starting to watch on your mobile devices. I mean, all that is changing. So, your user experience is important. But I think also it's important right now, like, people's attention spans are shorter. And also, like, you can lose your customers very easily. I mean, I think you owe it to your customers to try to, create as good an experience as possible where, like, they can find things, but also, like, to make sure that, like, your apps don't crash, like that, like it's streaming quickly enough or that they're accessing the content, because you'll lose people very easily, especially in as competitive a market. I mean, if any of you guys were opening up an app, say it was our app, and it took 5 minutes to start up and 2 minutes or 10 minutes to start a video, you wouldn't use it. And those are things that matter in terms of an experience, and it all kind of comes together.
You mentioned competitors. How are people feeling about the current environment? Connected TVs are coming in. You have app stores. You have people moving away from apps. So what do you think is going on with what will we be doing as consumers in the near future?
Well, I think there is a push to try to discover what that is. I mean, at the end of the day, like, we need to make sure that you can watch the content and watch the content that you want to, and kind of in the way that you want to. So let's say if you want to binge watch, then we need to make sure that after you finish that, the next episode is very easily queued up for you, and that you can move on to the next thing. Or if you're in a clip experience, like making sure that there's a seamless experience to kind of keep you engaged. That is challenge number one. But I think the second thing is always finding the next thing, and I don't think anyone really knows what that is. But with like connected TV devices and the ability to do things, with better technology, there could be better interactive experiences. I mean, who knows, like the way that you might vote on The Voice might change. So I think those are the opportunities there. But it's impossible to say what will stick or not. But I think there's just a lot of experimentation that'll happen in that area.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting times for us. Okay, so let's get into metadata. This was a metadata panel. We'll talk about metadata. And technology in the entertainment industry, and I was at Sony Music, and you guys did all this stuff, was some sort of, we used to talk about it as black ops, people that were doing really, really cool stuff. IT kind of, making sure like the phone rang and that faxes got through. When did data become important to the industry? Because data and this whole part of the industry wasn't always the number one topic. So when just looking back a little bit, I remember Hollywood IT, the summit 5 years ago. It was not about data. So when do you guys, if someone generally, where do you think data started becoming important, and what does that mean for the industry?
I'd probably say about 3 to 4 years ago. Metadata Madness was one of the big kickoff events where people started talking about it and being really interested in it. because it was affecting their lives in so many different fashions. So, I mean, we were interested in data with key code and some of that, but it was just very, very simple data. But
I mean, I'd say that, like, my view on it is that, data is just something that is going to inform you on whatever decision making you need, and I think that's just evolved over time, and your access and the amount of type of data that you can have is just increased exponentially. So I mean, if you look at, again, broadcast TV, you got Nielsen ratings. That is technically data, and that's data that's used to make decisions, whether you keep a show going or cancel it or decide to create a show similarly. But now you have so much more access to data about, you have analytics data about what, how people are viewing, how people are consuming, like where they're dropping off, or what two videos work well together. You have that data. You have data about the content itself and how that might work together, and where you can say, this one is similar to this one. There's data about the apps themselves, and how do you find and discover that stuff. There's just so much there. It's just all about how you want to use that, and I guess to what audiences that data is relevant for.
Do you think it would, so it's this 3 to 4 years, you were at Warner Brothers when we first started, when TOP started becoming more about data versus just finding things. Do you think 3 to 4 years is when it actually became sort of more of a priority?
I mean, again, I think it's just, where it is a priority for who the audience is. I mean, like if you look at Netflix, I mean, they were ahead of the game like more than 3 to 4 years ago. Probably.
Yeah, I guess we're saying the industry.
and I think that's just the inflection point, within your own organizations, is that, it's a cultural thing too, and it's a change for everybody to say, like, to focus on data, to like have standards, to actually, do something with it. I mean, like that's a cultural thing, and that, may not have changed for some organizations and may just change a year ago. I think that it just changes for, everybody across the way, and, I think that's just up to sort of people at conferences like these, like, to make that change within their organizations.
Or do you have a...
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think that it's bang on the head when you say, like, it's a cultural thing. Like, for us, it became big because with the content becoming available worldwide, there were just so many inefficiencies in our process, with all this data being manually keyed into spreadsheets and not having a single version of the truth to say, hey, you know what, I want to reuse this data so now I can send it out. There's just so many efficiencies over there if you don't pay enough attention to the data as you should do. And I think that's when we started looking at data to say, hey, you know what, we want to build a system where we can provide the studio with one focal point of what the data is. And so basically it's automated from then on in. I'm not having manual processes where I'm asking a marketing team or a territory team to basically key in the data 10 times over for 10 clients.
Yeah. But okay, so it was important, but it's not done, right? I mean, what we just heard someone at the last Metadata Madness talk about how elements of metadata are rekeyed 20 or 30 times. Mm-hmm. So we're not done, right? Yeah. Okay. So I want to really talk data, so now we're going to talk data. And Eric has agreed to walk us through the world of metadata and entertainment. So
well, one other comment on this. We've seen actually a senior leadership change too. A lot of the CTOs originally were more towards a hands-on electrical engineering type of background, and now they're going to computer science. We've seen these jobs flip very heavily in the last probably 2 years.
There's also a generational thing where that level of executives, and this is probably happening in many industries, but their kids started picking up iPads. And they started said, oh, it has a big impact. So let's talk about what impact this data has. So take us through if you want to. You can.
So one of the confusions that people don't understand why it's so complex is when you're dealing with film production, you've got descriptive metadata, you've got technical metadata, you've got transactional metadata. And then you got to look at it across the life cycle. Planning, pre-production, production, post, distribution, marketing, and archive. There's nobody in the studio that controls all of that space and defines exactly how it's going to work. And when it comes to standards in our industry, there's organizations like SMPTE, but SMPTE is never going to be able to address all of these as a collective. There's no way.
All right, so let's go back through each kind. So what is descriptive metadata?
So descriptive metadata is, what is the scene about? Who's in the scene? Stuff you really have to hand off when you're doing distribution, especially. So, who are all the actors, all the characters, stuff like that. Technical might be coming off the camera. what kind of different data flows are coming off the camera. I don't know if anybody knows, but a typical camera nowadays is shooting about 1 terabyte an hour when you're coming with an ARRI Alexa. The Sony F55 is around 600.
What is 8K, which is not yet here, but what is it? It's something like 200, right?
If you look at, I don't know exactly the number on that one,
more.
but if you look at HD on your standard television, that's 1K. What you're going to be seeing rolling out is what's called 4K, or you're also going to see UHD coming out. All the new TVs will write UHD on it. And what that is it's a combination of HDR and 4K. And HDR is a bigger contrast between blacks and whites. It is more colors that the screen can produce, and it's called nits. And nits are basically kind of a luminance factor. And it's not just like turning the brights up. You can see deeper into the picture. You can see in these areas that are kind of fuzzy traditionally. So it's a huge amount more data.
Transactional data?
So transactional data might be, what are the avails, what are the rights, who owns what, who did you sell what to. One of the ways they sell a lot of these films in the beginning is they'll go out and pre-sell rights to different regions or zones around the world. Okay, I'll get an insurance policy that says I'll finish this, and then I'll sell these things to fund my film.
So that's what we wanted to show. So in the planning phase, before there's a film, all this data is there.
Yeah.
And same thing when you're getting ready to shoot. It's not like it's isolated. And guess where this is going? When you're producing it, all this data is there. Post-production, distribution, marketing, archive. That's, whoa. Oh no, I left the last one off. All right, archive has it. PowerPoint failure. We needed you before, David. So that's what we wanted to show. So any
but
kind of
like you
wrapping it
said,
up?
what we have a challenge with is a lot of this stuff is rekeyed constantly over and over. We're getting this data, we have this data, yet we're rekeying it and putting it in. For example, most of the time, once we get to what we consider a centralized or finished film, then we've got to go use something like Mechanical Turk or a room full of people we stick in the basement that have to watch and categorize everything. So it's an utter waste.
That's awesome. Okay, so I want to come back to our project. So you guys have all been involved with great projects that are really pioneering what's going on in the industry. So I want you to expound on these great projects. And we're going to start over with our first customer in the industry, Warner Brothers, and tell us a little bit about some of the projects you've been doing and their impact on this topic.
Sure. So I think we've already talked a bit about it in terms of how we've had success with sort of NoSQL. The big sort of win for us was doing away with traditional ETL tools for content distribution. And when I say that, we're talking about delivering metadata for every title for over 150 territories worldwide for all of our digital partners. And you just couldn't do that earlier with your traditional ETL tools, where it would take you about 4 months to build a specification and then send that out. Today, I can do something as quickly and as efficiently as 4 weeks or 2 weeks, depending on the complexity of the spec, because of what we were able to do and accomplish with this. And what we're also basically starting to use this technology for is to actually do master data management itself in a NoSQL world, where you model you have the concept of entities and relationships versus a sort of SQL tabular form, and where you're confined to the rigid conformities of what a traditional relational database gives you. What I can now do right now is basically just model entities that are very loosely coupled, that have a bunch of attributes, where every time I need to add an attribute, it's not necessarily a schema change, it's a configuration change. And then I have these loosely coupled relationships that basically help me tie a title to a version, to a talent, to a particular award, to a particular country. And like, you have this sort of graphic-like structure that then lets you mine through that data for content discovery. That's something we've just started working with right now, but I think that is the way sort of master data management is going to go forward, wherein you don't know the schema ahead of time. The schema is constantly evolving. And so you need to have a system that's scalable and flexible enough where you can model these loosely coupled entities and then tie them with different relationships. And then if you add semantics to that later, where you can then store triples, you can then infer data from those relationships and then basically inform the customer about even options and like recommendations, which I think is the next step after that.
So you mentioned people that go find the data. So how is this data used? So there's a MarkLogic database.
So yeah,
how is the data used, and what applications are running out in the business?
So on a very high level, what we have today is we have an MDM system that sits sort of separate from the MarkLogic world. And what the MDM system basically does is it basically gets data feeds from 7 different sources from within the company. It's a data aggregator, it's a data cleanser, and then we have survivorship rules to say, hey, you know what? I have 7 different versions of truth for the Dark Knight. Let me actually have rules right now that can be configured to say, give me the best synopsis, the best title, the best rating. So the MDM system does that today, but then once that's done, I now need to distribute the metadata for the Dark Knight for over 150 territories to iTunes, to Google, to Amazon, to Netflix, to Hulu. And so that's where MarkLogic comes in. There's an integration between the MDM system and MarkLogic, where MarkLogic is getting the data, but it's now getting the data in the form of documents. And then you sort of build canonicals that help you sort of tie those different relationships together, so you can handpick or cherry pick the different data elements for each client, for each territory. And then you can then schedule data feeds out of MarkLogic, or you can have REST APIs that you can basically open up to clients where they can then come in and get the data.
Yeah, so the client's coming to get the data, so that's an important piece. Yeah. This isn't all just push. So
no.
Who comes into your system and selects the right version of the Dark Knight?
So for a lot of the internal applications, what we have are sort of real-time integrations wherein there's just the REST API, and then you have like a B2B portal that's a different application within the studio that needs the query for master data, and it needs that master data in a different format. So in that case, there's a REST API that works.
Yep.
I think for clients like iTunes and Amazon, you still go through post-production houses where it's more of a push model. But I think there will be a time where you will have some clients that will want to directly integrate, where clients will basically say, I want to integrate with a standard Warner Brothers gateway API to get metadata, to search for metadata, to order for data. I don't want to integrate with 10 different systems or get feeds from 10 different sources in 10 different Aspera directories or FTP directories. And I think that's where that might change.
Cool. All right, thanks. So let's go to Eddie. So Eddie, why don't you start? We're talking about SNL, talking about a great app. Maybe you could start with the moment you got the phone call that said, we want to, SNL has 40th anniversary, it's going to be live on the air, and we want to do this app to run on it. Can you take care of that?
Well, it started with, I mean, it wasn't just necessarily an app, it was just, can we do some kind of experience to pair with the special, which was a big deal and actually did really well. But I guess when I thought about it, it seemed like an amazing use case for semantics. Because it's this rich library with different characters, and it, although it's 40 years of content, it actually, to me, in terms of metadata, seemed like a reasonably finite set to deal with as well. We had to get that metadata put together, and I can talk about that if you guys would like. But
yeah, you should talk about it.
But it was something where, like, let's take advantage of semantics, and because SNL to everybody, and to probably every one of you guys, is different. Across what you guys have viewed, or probably around your college years, that's what resonates to you. I mean, you may not be watching it now, but you'll watch Will Ferrell if he pops on, or more cowbell or whatever. You'll watch that because you remember that, and those associations and all that, like semantic metadata, ties together, and that's kind of, we needed that base set to be able to build the experience that we wanted, and we wanted to build a predictive engine to recommend you clips so that we could keep you engaged, whether that's successful or not. You guys can test that yourselves. So we wanted that, so we needed the metadata to power that, but we realized too that people are going to want to search for the things that they want to find. And it may be something like, oh, I remember this sketch from the 80s, and I don't know the character's name, but I know it's this person, and so we wanted to be able to empower that experience too. So we wanted to build an app where you could appreciate the 40 years of content in a way where you could just sit and have things come to you and enjoy things from across different eras, as well as be able to find the things that you really enjoyed from watching SNL over 40 years.
So you mentioned the show was really successful. It was something like the largest non-live sporting event in last
I think
3
it was
years or
like
something?
25 million people watched
25
that.
million people. That's a huge number. Just in case you're wondering, that's a huge number. I'm sorry. I was gonna make a Trump joke before, but I'm not gonna make that. I just did. It's a huge number. Okay. How about the app? I know you guys, kind of talk about what experiences people have had on it. We know there was a lot of traffic because there were a large team of people watching it when it was launching. But how about the app? How's it doing? What are your metrics and how's it doing?
The app's doing well. We can't share a lot of numbers, but
Can you share some general numbers?
In the first few months, we had like 100 million video views, which was more than we expected, and also the single session engagement numbers are much higher than just normal viewing on the website. So that's definitely a win. I think in the industry, that's what you want is engagement. So keeping people watching is definitely better than I think we were expecting as well.
Cool. All right, so I want to get to your exciting project. We're going to be down. This is a new thing from MarkLogic. We're going to take part in a movie premiere in Hollywood. I keep telling people that, we can hang out. So why don't you tell us about the suitcase and what's going on with ETC?
So basically, we were looking to do tests, and we originally started with Universal as a partner. So being able to do an actual production, just a short film, and getting to test some of these new technologies. So the first year we did it, it was more about what works and what doesn't. This year we're applying a lot of different new techniques and tools and applying a framework to interoperability. So our framework is basically 2 primary pieces right now, and that's basically pushing all the vendors to go for RESTful APIs and JSON. And as the first piece of the recipe, the second one is using a hash system to identify assets. So instead of a registry like IDER, UMID, all these other things that we do which require a registry, using mathematics so that you can kind of have it as a Rosetta Stone. So that was the first half of the piece, and this is funded by Disney and Universal. And you might have saw Anthony talk or take the award yesterday. He's very involved in that. He's actually leading the team up for that there. So, and then the other aspect is metadata. How do you basically begin to create these ontologies and pull the data from the correct sources live? So the data in production is constantly translated. It's always changing. You might have scripted somebody to be on there. They didn't put them there. The costumes changed. Other things change all the time. So being able to take snapshots and being able to look at this data at different points so that you do not have to recreate it. So so we have the film will be coming out at the end of the month. So
I just want to make sure that's clear. So you guys shot a film to experiment with new digital techniques to lead the industry forward to understand that they can actually make benefit from these new, So I think it's tremendous. So. Okay, so I want to ask you guys, we're all going to ask for questions. So this is it says right here, tee up questions from the audience. So start thinking about some questions. And while you guys are teeing up some questions, I want to ask you guys just one thing. So great projects, awesome pieces, the experience are changing, production changing, how we manage it changing. Is there some piece of what you think of the future that's here right now? So is there something out there, the industry, that is around today that stands out as a real sign of where things are going? It's an open-ended question. You guys hit that, and we'll get the questions from the audience.
You want to take a stab at that?
Okay, well, you're talking about production stuff.
I'll answer. So I don't want to say this in terms of complete game changer, changing everything, but I think it's interesting, say these voice recognition technologies that are out there and Alexa and things like that, where it needs to be powered by data and metadata, because unfortunately these AI tools are not self-thinking or operating at this point. They need to be trained and they need to be taught things, and all that needs to come from data unless you're manually keying on all these things. So I think it's certainly an opportunity in order to kind of help improve different experiences. I think Apple's going so far as allowing you to enter your password in via dictation versus typing it in on Apple TV. I think that they realize there's gaps in these experiences, and I think where voice commands and recognition, across your devices can maybe change how you're using them.
Right.
But again, they need to be powered by data.
Changing the experience to be more about voice and AI. That's one. That's a good one. Something else? Is anybody going to say VR? Because
VR is really big in Hollywood right now.
I was going to say virtual reality.
Okay, you're going to go for VR. Good. That's good. That's a good one.
But the thing is, there's so much untapped potential. You don't even know like how it can best be monetized or how you can basically best provide the required user experience that are going to compel users to keep coming back for that. But I feel like that is the next big thing, and you are seeing that with devices on your phone today, where you can get those the goggles with the Samsung S7 Edge, and with different kinds of gaming experiences out there. I think VR and even AR, for that matter, augmentative reality with the Google Glass. I think that's that's not fully met its potential.
Okay, so VR, immersing yourself in the experience. Do you have? So we got the robots we're going to talk to, the experience we're going to lose ourselves in.
So I just real quickly comment on his. I wasn't really a big VR fan, and then I went to a group where students were all doing it, and every single school at USC had representatives. The medical school, the architecture school, the press groups, everybody was participating. And so it was kind of an eye-opener of how it's going to begin to touch so many different verticals.
All right, so we'll double down on VR. Okay, questions. And I have to repeat your questions. So you have a question? Let's have it up.
How are you guys foreseeing analytics being used to actually produce movies?
Okay.
I'll give you an example. Like, let's say a studio wants to go after a sequel, Rambo number 75.
All right, I'm not repeating all this.
Analyze and,
All right, so how are we going to use movies? How are we going to use analytics to predict movies?
Right.
Yeah, I used to joke that's the easiest way to get a meeting in Hollywood, and the easiest way never to, when you actually show up and say you can do it, it's the easy way never to have another meeting. So, all right, so what do you guys think? What analytics to predict movies?
I feel like building feedback loops with your different partners to understand how the content is being consumed. That's something that's just started to take off, where like, say for instance, you have someone like a Google that has APIs that basically lets you track the usage of a particular video asset, or like the state of an asset through the supply chain as it's being delivered. I think using that data to basically bring it back into your system and tying it to your original data, and then having analytics engines that sit on top of that to say, you know what, how was this content actually used in China versus how was it used in, like, say, Eastern Europe, or how did it perform over here? I think that is one way you could possibly do that.
But there are teams of people doing this.
Yeah.
Just to be clear. But the question is, do you think is it evolving to be a more effective part of the industry?
So we actually just opened a whole project on that right now. So we hired a manager for big data and everything, and sitting down with the heads of the studios to really dive deeper, because it's such a big space.
So I could put the creative hat on. You have to have creatives. You can't just go by what people want.
Well, I'm not going to speak for movies specifically, but within TV and I think online viewing, it's definitely important and is relevant. But going back to the culture point, it's really all about, are the decision makers willing to take that data? What data are they actually interested in? And then are we collecting that data? But within online viewing and within TV specifically, those feedback loops are much shorter now. I mean, you could see that. And we have content that actually maybe doesn't do as well in broadcast, but does really well on digital. And so, you can look at that and realize, oh, well, we should be promoting, this content more on this platform. And actually, it's all by platform too, because if you look at Xbox One, I mean, that demographic is actually a bit different than a Roku. So you can't even promote the same across those, because, you want to promote different content that appeals to the gamers versus, those that are using a Roku.
All right. Okay, another topic, another question?
Hi guys, thanks for the panel. We haven't spoken about MarkLogic and the infrastructure for the advertisers. And, just as a joke, the Hulu when it switches from the program to the ad, sometimes breaks, but the program might not come back on after the ad's done. But anyway, I know your customers, your revenue flow comes from the advertisers. So any ways you want us to think about how this platform works with your partners, your advertising partners?
Okay, so we're talking about advertisers, MarkLogic, are using these new technologies with the how these kind of platforms can help you work with your part of your customers, the revenue side of the advertisers. And we gotta. You're the guy running full.
Well, I say the
so.
answer is really complicated because there's so many different factors at play. Because there's different ad networks. Unless you could control like all the ad inventory and how ads are being served out, and the technology that's choosing the ad for you, and so on and so forth. If you could control all of that, you can provide a better experience.
So, but where are we today?
So I want to recommend you attend Gene's session from ALM a little bit later, because he's actually digging into a little bit of this. Sorry. All right, let's go to another topic.
Is there anything being done around sort of deeper tagging around scene content? For example, if you look at a particular scene, you see what is this person wearing, what's on the stage, a chair or something. And
Absolutely.
So let me repeat it.
To purchase that item. For
Yeah. So is there anything being done with scene level tagging? What are the items on the set? What are the, we can go further. What brand names are the suit the guy's wearing?
Exactly.
Chair, and how does it reflect to distribution? That is a great question.
So one of the number one companies out there is called Sync on Set. They do about 50% of all scripted television. They've actually shown this end to end. So you have either old school books to track all these items, these props and these things, or you do something like Sync on Set. And so they already have all these assets and tracking it, and they've shown some really beautiful work where you can look and buy all that stuff, and it immediately takes you to inventory and stores and all of that. When it comes down to the ontologies of actions and other things, that's some of the stuff we're working with Disney on how you categorize a particular scene.
Didn't you just say that the production environment was really, really chaotic and didn't have any rules? So it's actually something the Suitcase film is attempting to address.
So we're trying to bring all these.
It's a huge revenue stream.
And so, okay, question over here.
Okay, so I was interested in, so you've set up all these processes for production from start to finish, introducing metadata along the way, but I guess, especially for Eddie, you had experience of having to take archive content and mark all of that content up. So what was the process there? So we at the BBC have a lot of archive content that we just look over our shoulder and think, we need to enrich this, and we've got quite a few processes trying, but I was just interested in your experiences of marking up that content.
Okay. So Matt from the BBC would like to know, how do we deal with archive content, marking it up, and bringing data into it specifically around SNL? So I'm going to hand the ball to you first, but this is a big topic also.
So you're probably not going to like the answer I'm giving because it's not like there's a magic robot out there that can do all that. But it was important for us to create the model and actually know how to educate the taggers that we're going to do that and give them some confines to work within. And even specifically, because I am not really a big fan of just straight keywords. That's why we semantically said you need to put it in this relationship. And we were able to create some generic structures that allowed them some flexibility. But basically, we hired what we call the Metadata Army. And actually, it didn't take as long as we thought, nor as many people as we thought too. Especially because we knew what we wanted up front in terms of specifically this stuff. And for a given record, it wasn't like we were asking them to do 300 things. And I think that's an important thing to say. Here's what's important to us, and really not to get caught up in it would be so cool to know what color hat that character was wearing. It's not important, and that's maybe something you can get to later. But what they actually did was they sat in a room and watched SNL clips and basically tag things. And maybe it went faster because it was a more fun exercise. But
A great job.
We have stuff where we have, say, radio shows about. So we have 2 radio shows about one particular road in the UK called the 8440. And there are 2 radio shows about it, and it took somebody going through archive content to listen to those things and go, okay, this is about the 8440. And I mean, that's a boring job. That's a really
Yeah. Okay. Maybe the same technique won't apply. I'm going to give it again. Talking with Disney. Do you want to comment on it?
Well, I was going to also say with the BBC, you guys have the Dublin core. So there's a core set of metadata standards for the very end here that you'd be archiving. And so also some of the studios will have 13, 15, 20, depending on which studio, just to go into the archive. So they know specifically, like you said, they're not asking about the color hats or anything like that. We've seen kind of some of the analytics work on the backside, though. If you look at something like The Hobbit, you're talking about 10 petabytes for the movie, upwards to 20 when you talk about the full process. So being able to apply analytics to see what you save and what you don't save, final content-wise.
All right, one more question. I've got 2 more questions. Tim, you don't get to ask a question. You guys over there, sorry, standing up. We'll go first, standing up.
A simple question, the gentleman from Warner Brothers. So you have an MDM system with some sort of coming in. With the introduction of MarkLogic, where do you see the value of MDM moving forward?
Very good question.
So I think we definitely, what you're seeing is a paradigm shift in master data management to move away from SQL to NoSQL. So you definitely can do a lot of the work that you do in traditional MDM tools, which is applying survivorship and aggregation directly in MarkLogic. But what you're also seeing is sort of a change in the way people look at where the creation of metadata should originate, where instead of me getting a feed from 7 different sources, the master data management system should be the point of origin for content creation that then drives that data out. So you're literally taking that model and flipping it over its head, and I think that's the direction we want to head in.
That's a great question. So I promised that we were going to do a lightning round before we finish. So you guys have to go through, we're going to get to lunch, but first you guys have to have a lightning round. So lightning round is one question, very quick. I'm going to give you some options, and you guys have to give me your answer. Usually it's one word. A little bit of hemming and hawing might be there, and there's one choice you cannot pick, which is both. Okay, you have to pick, all right? So, VR, hype or the future?
Future.
Future.
Let's say the same.
All right, future for VR, okay. How about live events versus scripted content, which will have more impact in the industry?
Scripted content.
Scripted.
All right.
Can I say both?
Nope.
I'll go with the latter then.
Live events, okay, good. So what will be bigger among kids? Watching video games being played or actually playing video games?
Watching video games.
Playing video games.
I'm old school, still playing.
Playing video games, okay. Now speaking of kids, you guys just did Batman vs. Superman. We know that there's America's thing. So I want to break this down a little bit. This is the Captain America war. Captain America versus Batman.
Captain America.
Batman, hands down.
All right. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Captain America.
Captain America. Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, so breaking the other part of that around, because it's how it's Captain America versus Iron Man. So Iron Man versus Superman.
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 Yeah, sorry. Sorry. That was Tony Stark. I was going to unplug him. All right, so that's cool. For the future of entertainment, what's more important, data or storytelling? Hey, you guys are not playing.
Storytelling.
Storytelling.
Yeah, but I feel like efficiency. I mean,
if you're going to say data, say data.
I'm going to say data then.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so here's another one. Metadata standards or competitive data advantages?
Competitive data.
Yeah, that's good.
Competitive data.
Yeah.
Standards.
All right, so you have to run the systems.
Exactly.
So, All right, where's the industry headed? Streaming or downloads?
Streaming.
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 Okay, speaking of streaming, J-Lo or Beyonce?
J-Lo?
Beyonce.
Yeah, gotta go for Beyonce.
Beyonce.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell them
Way to go.
apart.
Okay,
I don't know.
big experience, big time experience, theater experience, or one-to-one small screen experiences?
One-to-one small screen.
Same.
1-to-1.
Oh wow, I was thinking big screen. Okay, the best way to integrate all your metadata, tie it together with search engines, buses, all this other technology, or put it all in a metadata hub with MarkLogic.
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 All right, I was just making sure you guys are right. All right, and the last one. One word on the future of entertainment.
Future of entertainment?
I'll go.
Data.
Exciting, data,
promising?
Big data.
Big data. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And thank you all for sticking around.